getting to the end of my Roy Harper thing, which remember went from 75 through to 1980, and ultimately even a bit later than that. But I really worked with Roy right up until the end of 79, and we did a tour, 4-piece band with Preston Heyman on drums, Val Moss on bass, myself and Roy, and we finished up at the Dominion Theatre in London. And a couple of times on the tour leading in there, David Gilmour, who was a good friend of Roy's, had turned up and jammed. He joined in with the band, which was fun, and I liked David and we got on well. He came to the last night in London, and it was late in 79, I think. And the next, this was 1980, sorry. Month is the same, but it's 1980 because I played with Floyd in 81. And what happened was that David was there, at the end of 1980, Dominion Theatre in London. Next day, he phoned me up at home, and he made a proposal. He said, "Look," he said, "we've got 7 dates booked to play the Pink Floyd show, The Wall, in Germany in, I think, March." And he said, he said, explain the concept of the show, which is that we have what's called a surrogate band in the way we present the show, and that is a second band that exactly mirrors the lineup of the actual Pink Floyd. So there is another guitarist, another bass player, another drummer, and another keyboard player. Because of illusions that we create within the show, we sometimes use that band on its own, or sometimes they're brought in to bolster the band, so we become an 8-piece band on stage. And he said the guitarist has been Snowy White for the first tour. We started in Los Angeles, we then went and played Nassau Coliseum on Long Island, then we came and played Earl's Court, and that was all in 1980, so I was pretty aware of what they'd done. But he said Snowy has joined Thin Lizzy and he's not available to do these dates. Would you consider doing them? So, a bit of a jaw drop, probably took me 2 milliseconds before I said yes.
That long?
Yeah, and that was it. So that's how I got the gig.
Was the money,
No, the money was silly. Everything was silly. But what happened was that before that happened, I'd been involved in 1979, just on a session. BJ Cole, my old friend who I'd known for the best part of 10 years, maybe not so many, maybe 7 or 8 years, pedal steel player, wonderful guitarist, good session player. So I knew him from session playing. He played on that album of mine that you've got. He played on that all over it. And a good friend, great musical collaborator. He'd involved me. He said, "I've got this singer that I'm producing some tracks for. I've got money from Andrew Lauder at United Artists. Would you come in and play on the tracks?" I can't remember where it was, somewhere in South London, the studio, smallest studio in South London. So sure, no problem. So I went in, and this was Hank, who I knew, Hank Langford, who I'd known through Lindsay Ingram when we did Wordplay, which several years before. I'd seen him socially a bit through, but not a lot. And we went in, and I loved the tracks, they were great. Albert Lee came in and played guitar on them, and it was a good band. So then Andrew heard them and said, "No, I'm going to pass, I don't think so." So the money ran out, there was nothing to finish it off. So then BJ panicked and said, You've got to finish this album, I want to finish this album off. So I said, "Oh, fine." I said, "I don't really want to play country music. I've been there and done that, and I don't think it's a good career move, but I'll come in and play on the album." So I went in and played on the album. I did enjoy it a lot. The next thing was that BJ was putting the album out on his own label, which is called Cow Pie. And
of course it will.
Yeah, like the Desperate Dan Cow Pie with the horns and the smell coming off. And he said, "Well, we've got to promote it. I've got 3 dates booked." He said, "The Hope and Anchor in Islington, the Half Moon in Putney, and the Pegasus in Stoke Newington." He said, "That I just want to play 3 showcase dates. That's it. You don't have to do anything after that, but just please play those dates." So, okay, fine. So I got out the cowboy hat, put on a suit, went and did these things. And on one of those dates, may even have been that Hope and Anchor. Billy Connolly showed up with his then girlfriend Pamela Stevenson and hired the whole band. It might not have been the first one at the Hope and Anchor. I'm thinking about it. It might have been, because what happened was that we played those 3 dates, and honestly, it was the most fun I'd had standing up that year. It was bloody brilliant. It was funny. It was musically great. It was lovely stuff. It went down a treat with an audience, and I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do some more." So we carried on with it, and we rapidly built a very good following. But anyway, there was definitely one night at the Hope and Anchor, Hope and Anchor in Islington, that Billy came down with Pam Stevenson, who was just his new sort of trophy girlfriend, and he talked to us after the gig, and he just hired the whole band for his next tour. So before I actually got to Germany with Pink Floyd, I'd been out and done 3 weeks with Billy Connolly. So the Langford band was shut down because he hired the whole band apart from Hank and Mel Harold, the girl singer, who I knew well because she'd been in the Albion band that I'd done in 77 or 78, or both years, I think. Fabulous singer. I met her earlier than that at the Edinburgh Festival, actually, when she was working with Paul Jones in a musical. Anyway, by the by. But so we went out on tour with Billy, and interestingly, I'd been given a bunch of Pink Floyd's equipment to learn to play. You know, it was like, take this echo machine and take this pedal board and learn to use this ahead of going out to Germany and playing The Wall with Pink Floyd. So I did a Billy Connolly tour with Pink Floyd's equipment. It was just kind of like, you couldn't make it up. It was just brilliant. We had a wonderful time. There is a video of that. I think that's on
YouTube.
YouTube, yeah. You can find, if you look for Cripple Creek, there's a good version of Cripple Creek there with Billy Connolly, and that had what's his name? Phil Coulter played keyboards. It was the Langford band. It was me, the drummer, Howard Tibble, Gary Taylor on bass, myself on guitar, BJ Cole on steel guitar, and then a friend of ours called Ricky Cool and the Rialtos, wonderful band from Birmingham, still going. Tricks is Ricky is all over YouTube as well, giving harmonica tutorials. He's a wonderful man. He was in the band, and then Phil Coulter, who was the guy that co-wrote Puppet on a String, and was also managing Billy at the time in the band. So that's on there, and of course Billy in front playing banjo. So yeah, we did that. And then as soon as I got off the Billy Connolly tour, I was off to Germany with Pink Floyd. We had one rehearsal. I had one rehearsal. They viewed it as checking that the equipment was working. I viewed it as a rehearsal. That was at the Rank Studios in, I think it was Pinewood. Or maybe it was Denham. Maybe that's the same, I don't know. I'm not big on British film studios. But they'd got a sound stage and set all the gear up and ran through the show. But that was literally the only rehearsal I had, other than the fact that before that I'd gone down to Dave Gilmour's house, into his personal studio, and he had just one-on-one taken me through the set, you know, sort of played the songs and we'd run through, and I'd learnt what I needed to do. So I had very little preparation for this. So yeah, David was then living in Henley, so that Henley's big pop residents were David Gilmour and George Harrison, but and I think Mick Ralphs of Bad Company, I think he lived down there somewhere. Thames Valley stuff. I suppose Jimmy Page had lived there for a time in Pangbourne, but he was not involved with any of this. Anyway, I rehearsed in David's studio in his fancy house, big house. Called Hook End Manor. It had been built by Charles Claw, the property magnate, and property magnates can always build a house because they're property magnates. So anyway, that was just personal one-on-one rehearsals. Then I had the run through with the gear at Pinewood, and then the next thing, or Shepperton, I think it was Shepperton actually, and then the next thing was I was on a flight out to Germany. We had one run through in Germany of the entire show, and that was to check that the video projections were working and the sound was all the sound lines were going on. And then we opened the show, and I had very little rehearsal. The reason being that they'd done 29 shows the year before. So they all knew it inside out and backwards, and so were probably so bored they could phone it in. But I'd never played it before. I'd never played with a band. I'd never played to 25,000 people inside before. You know what I mean? I mean, it was a big step up in scale, Nick. This is not, it's not just the usual kind of jump from one little gig to another.
Because you were pretty much involved through the whole show, I guess. Weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely, on stage all the time, and I was well, not 100% of the time, but for a lot of the time, and also. 3 days before I'd been playing the Pegasus in Stoke Newington, when you're playing in a pub to 180 people. To go from that to 25,000, that's a mental leap. You know what I mean? Got a lot of gear to contend with. It's all different. Mind you, I was playing at the Pegasus with Pink Floyd gear as well, but that was just one of those things. So it was weird. So it was a strange thing. I enjoyed it very much. I was well paid. There was so much to get used to, the sort of backstage lives, and the fact that you needed 3 passes to get to where you were working. You know what I mean? The all areas pass and all the rest of it. It was sort of like security within security within security before you got anywhere near where you were. And all of that.
How long did the show last when you were actually on then?
How long?
Yeah, the duration of the show, not how long it was on.
I would say probably an hour and 3/4.
Okay, but
with an interval.
But did you have to get there pretty early anyway to set up for it?
Well, this was in Germany, so we were staying in a hotel. The show was in Dortmund at the Westfalenhalle, which is a sports arena. We, however, were staying in Dusseldorf, which is half an hour's drive away by coach. Why that happened, I don't know. I do know that when we were in Dortmund, while we were there doing this thing, we were bidden by the mayor of Dortmund to a civic reception, because during the time that we were there, and it was originally booked for 8 days, but they added an extra show. So I suppose that meant that we played to 200,000 people in a week. During the time we were there, we became the 10th biggest industry in the Ruhr. Which was quite impressive, really. And I remember Steve O'Rourke proudly telling me that. He was Floyd's manager then. Anyway, we had a civic reception with gourmet food. Somebody had told them that Pink Floyd, they like gourmet food. It's the only time in my life, to this day, and I've had a long life, I'm 77 years old now, lived every one of them, as you can see. The only time I've ever walked into a place where there was food and I could not tell you what any of it was. I could not put a descriptive name to anything that was in the...
It all tasted good, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, But honestly, I mean, we're talking about lark's tongues in aspic. I mean, and if you don't know what they are, I hadn't got a clue. It's always like, yeah, try a bit of that. Oh, that's nice. What the hell is that? Because you're in Germany.
Best not to know.
Even if it had a ticket, it was in German. So, we hadn't got a clue. So we sat around this big table, and there were all these civic dignitaries, glad handing and being nice to us. It was bizarre.
Was Pink Floyd staying in the same hotel as you?
I was staying in the same hotel as Pink Floyd, except for Roger Waters. There was already a big split between Roger and the rest of the band. So this was the last time that band worked together, except for a brief tour the next year after they made a not very good album called, well, not very good, that's unfair, a not well received album called The Final Cut, and they toured it a little bit, but honestly the division between Gilmour and Waters was pretty big by then. I mean, well, just carrying on, so they added an extra date. I was 4 shows in when Steve O'Rourke, their manager, called me over after the 4th show, backstage. Andy, I want a word with you. I thought, oh my God, here we go. I've been held up to the light and they can see through me. I've been found wanting, or as Adrian would have said, you're going to get your collar felt. He got me up and he said, yeah, I just want to say, I've had a word with the band and you've got the gig. I walked away. Yeah, that was it. And it was like, bloody hell. I mean, it does make you feel good when you hear stuff like that, I've got to say. That was a big relief.
Well, you. I mean, you must have been playing. If you were playing, like you said, not the substitute band, but you were having to play their music as a surrogate band.
I'd never listened to Floyd before. I honestly hadn't. I went to see at Wembley Arena. I was given a free ticket, and I don't know why. I think it might have been by Dick Parry, who played the sax on Dark Side of the Moon. I don't think it was the Dark Side tour. I think it was after that. I think it might have been the Animals tour or one of the ones subsequent. It was definitely Wembley Arena. Dick was definitely on stage. I think he might have fixed the ticket for me. And I liked it. I mean, it was great music. I knew what all the fuss was about. I knew how good they were in an arena context. I also knew that there was this weird anonymity that went with them. At that point, nobody knew who the hell was in Pink Floyd. There was the whole cult of Gilmour and, world-class guitarists and all that hadn't really started. And they were very big and successful and making lots of money, but, well, it certainly hadn't reached me, really. I knew who David was only after I'd started working with him when I was touring with Roy in 1979, 80, that kind of period. That was when I first started getting to know David. But then, of course, I got this gig in 81 and it all changed. But I really enjoyed the experience of it. But then what happened was they added the extra date. There was some interesting things at the end of that leg, the German thing. I thought this was the point at which I was being paid off, and so did they actually. At that point, that was the end of the job. And I was called in to see the accountants. It was a big show. There was about 150 people on the crew, plus the band. Every single member of the band had his own roadie. That was how crazy it was. There were backing singers. There was the technical side was ridiculous. I mean, the staging, the physical side, the wall, the way that they could build it and then collapse it in a controlled way. I mean, there was one night playing in Germany when there'd been a very raucous element. Now, the way it was set up was that every night it was a different country. What they did was they'd sell all of the tickets one night in France. Next night they'd sell all of the tickets to northern Germany. Then the next night they'd sell all of the tickets to southern Germany and Austria. Then the next night they'd all been sold in Italy, and the next night they'd all been sold in Spain. So every night had a different character. It was really bizarre, but that was how it was structured. They just gave one night's tickets.
Didn't that put the timings out a bit?
In what way?
Well, if you're playing music as they're building the wall and everything, wasn't that?
Well, there were built-in sections of freeform where David and I would just riff and keep playing stuff off each other so that the wall could catch up and it could be built perfectly because, the timing was absolutely critical. But what happened was that one night the crowd was a bit raucous. I remember it well. It was just over this side, stage left, and looking at them, and I think they were Germans that night, and Roger took a dislike to them. So he gave the word at the end of the show, when the wall is collapsed, I mean, it's like there's subs under they could shake the building. It was unbelievable. The amount of physical motion that could be imparted, the energy that you could feel deep down. It was like an earthquake when this wall was collapsed, which was only built out of corrugated cardboard. It was like sort of the bricks were sort of boxes made out of the stuff that in those days fridges used to come packed in, you know what I mean? So it's quite solid, rigid stuff. Pretty heavy, each individual brick that was built. But Roger put the word to the people who control the hydraulics, because as the bricks were laid, these cobble bricks, these hydraulic sort of towers, whatever you call them, arms, used to be raised up inside and they locked the wall. And at the top, there was this thing, it was sort of heart-shaped, and they could flip it that way or that way. They could, they were able to oscillate this thing. And that was how, when at the end of the show, the wall was collapsed, with this thunderous noise going on and the rest of it, they'd flip it literally, first row that way, next row that way. So it fell in a controlled collapse so that you didn't kill people. But Roger went to the hydraulics people and he told them to deliberately push the entire thing into the crowd that side because he didn't like them. It was brilliant. They actually did. I mean, it only caught the first rows, but you didn't want that coming down on your head. I had to play underneath that thing when it was coming down. I was in a cage behind it, absolute rigid cage, very, very solid, like an Anderson shelter.
Did you have to wear latex gear as well?
Yeah, that was earlier on when I was in front of the wall. That was for the opening of the show, and also for a period in the second half when we played in. There was a tune called "Run Like Hell." We do that, and that was in front of the line of the wall because there were multiple stages. There was a stage in front of the wall, and there was another stage behind it.
Wasn't it one of those shows where they recorded for the album, the live album?
What?
You know, the Wall, the live album.
Yeah.
That was the shows that you did.
I played on those. Yeah.
Did you get royalties for that, or is it?
No, because I was working on a buyout. Yes, it doesn't sell much, you know. I get money and Snowy gets money, who is the guitarist I took over from. I had to get in touch with James Guthrie, was the recording engineer and the out front mixer for those live shows, and say, what did I play on? Because what they did was they mixed and matched some of Snowy's performances with some of my performances. So I played most of the feature acoustic guitar parts I played, and on some of the electric guitar parts. I played on Run Like Hell. He played the solo on. He played the surrogate solo on Another Brick in the Wall. I'm on YouTube. I think there's every night that I played. I'll get to that later on. But Snowy's on that, and he played on Young Lust, which is a track I really loved. But I played I played on Comfortably Numb. I played on Hey You. But I played on Another Brick and all that stuff as well. But anyway, James sent me a spreadsheet, literally a breakdown, track by track. That's you, that's Snowy. I use that of yours and I use that of Snowy. So I could exactly claim which tracks I should be paid on. So I don't get, for the whole album, I get only the tracks I played on. So if those particular tracks are played on the radio, then I would get a royalty of, 0.00003p. One of those. But anyway, I have nothing but brilliant things to say about it. At the end of the tour, I was called in by the accountants, say 150 on the crew, 4 accountants with that particular thing. And it wasn't a tour, it was we literally played one place and Europe came to us, every night a different country. And I was called in to get paid on the final morning when they were tearing it down and all the rest of it. And the accountants sitting, and so I was ushered into a room as a bloke sitting with a table with just piles of money on it. It was just insane.
You got paid cash?
Yeah, it was insanity. And he was sitting there, and he looked up and said, yeah. I said, I'm Andy, I'm a surrogate guitarist. I looked down the list. Yeah, okay. I think I was paid 500 quid a night, which is a lot of money in 1981. 500 quid was, what would that be? That would be, $2,000 now. And that was per night, and I got 8 nights to be paid. So he looked down and said, okay, and then he sat back and said, okay, right, here we go. So, right, there's your total. Right, so deductions, in the hotel, food, telephone, DB. I said, what's DB? He said, drugs bill. Oh, yeah, right, okay. Because every night they come around, is there anything you want, Anne? Anything I can get you? Yeah, I would answer that, and a couple of grams of that. So it was proper, intelligent, sensible living. So all came off, and then at the end of it, he said, right, what do you want to be paid? There's the total. What do you want to be paid? I can't remember what it was. It was, it was thousands of pounds. And I said, well, I don't know. What do you suggest? And he said, well, you can have it. You can have it in anything, because, francs. Because it was it was all euros, obviously, but you can have it. No, it wasn't all euros, because I was paid in Deutschmarks. So I don't know when Germany went over to the euro, but they obviously preserved their currency at that point. But he said to me, I recommend Deutschmarks. He said the rate's very good at the moment. You get more back. They change it up when you get to England and make you more money. So yeah, Deutschmarks, fine. That's fine with me. So he literally paid me off in total, in cash, in Deutschmarks, and for that I had to sign a petty cash voucher, one of those little pink things that you get from WH Smith. It sort of said, Andy Roberts, guitar, sign here. You know, that was it. A petty cash voucher. It was such small beer that nobody gave a shit, you know.
It's just an amazing
It was
experience.
insane. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Then what happened, I got back, and you know, a month later, 5 weeks later or something, I got another phone call from Steve O'Rourke saying, Andy, right, we're making a film with The Wall. It's going to be a concert film. And we've got to film the show in concert. So he said, what we've done, he said, we booked Earl's Court for 5 nights. So are you free? So I couldn't believe my luck, because it meant that I was going to do 5 more nights with this ridiculous rock and roll dinosaur exposure in my home country, you know, in my hometown. And all my mates could come and see me being a member of Pink Floyd. It was bloody brilliant, you know. You didn't get free tickets, they weren't that dumb. I got about 2. The rest of the time, you know, I had to pay for the tickets that my mates had. But some of them paid for their own and paid me back, but I basically had to book them and buy them all. But, you know, I was making all this money, and you want your mates to see you, you know. I think it was 10 quid a ticket. So, I mean, I could have bought 50 tickets a night for what they were paying me. Not that I did, but, you know what I mean. And we played 5 nights at Earl's Court. So that was, and then at the end of that, that was it, done and dusted, you know. And I've seen David a few times since then, and Rick Wright a couple of times, and Nick Mason a couple of times. But I honestly, you know, I wasn't a member of Floyd except for that one thing, which really only went from sort of March through to the end of June or something, and that was it.
The connections, though, in your life have been really interesting, haven't they? How one led to the other. I mean,
well,
Roy Harper got you really...
Got me to introduce me to Gilmour,
yeah.
In essence, yeah. Those shows are on YouTube, a lot of them, and what's interesting about that is that the second solo, I only had 1 solo a night once I was there and playing and replacing Snowy. The surrogate guitarist gets 1 solo a night. And that's on Another Brick in the Wall. I got the first solo every night in the big hit single, you know, We Don't Need Your Education, which comes about sort of 20 minutes into the show. And I think pretty much every night of that is on YouTube. I've listened to them. I mean, I've kind of blanked out the ones where I didn't play very well, or you know, or there's one that I think is the best. I think it's June the 17th. I think that one was a good one. You know what I mean? But it's all in that period. But you know, it is what it is. The live album came much later, and that was when they got in touch with me and they told me that they were putting out a live album. And in fairness, they have always sent. I got initially it came out as just a 2 CD thing, I think, and they sent me one of those, and then they brought out a massive, great big box. It was like 180 quid or something like that. A few years back now, probably 10, 12 years ago, and they sent me one of them. God bless them. You know, so, and it came with, I don't know, garments and, you know, badges and extra data discs and all of that stuff. It was just amazing.